community for many, many years and is also a regular maintainer of multiple open source projects. Today, he will talk about mocking client and server-side API calls using Selenium BiDi. Welcome, Vitalii.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to this talk. Let's wait a few people. So, BiDi was mentioned yesterday during the Selenium ecosystem state. So also there was a dedicated talk about BiDi made by Maxim about BiDi internals. So BiDi is our future. And today I want to share my experience with a specific use case for BiDi, request mocking. So let me quickly introduce myself. Currently, I live in Spain and work for a pharma company as a full-stack developer. I mostly write code in TypeScript and use Next.js as my primary framework. And at the free time, I maintain several open source projects, mainly related to test automation, because I'm a big fan of test automation. And the most noticeable one is Playwright BDD. So if you use behavior-driven development in your projects, and if you use Playwright, and maybe use MobileWrite in the future, so you can try it. And during the preparation for this talk, I was curious, when did I write my first test? And I scrolled GitHub history and found this commit made 14 years ago. And the testing landscape these days was absolutely different from what we have now. Selenium existed, but there was a Phantom.js tool that was the trending tool for headless browser automation. Does anybody remember Phantom.js? Okay, a few people. So, and frankly, I remember this feeling when I realized that I can automate browser with just a script. So I write a script, there is no actual browser window, but I can do things inside the browser. And it was so exciting. But today we are talking about more modern approaches, Selenium BiDi and request mocking. So a few words about the agenda for today. I try to make it very practical talk. So I will show you the demo. We will start with the demo. And then we will try to test the demo application using different approaches. The first one without any request mocking. We'll discuss the advantages, disadvantages. Then we will apply request mocking on the browser side. And after that, we will try to mock requests on server. That is even more tricky. And finally, discuss some limitations and general rules for request mocking. So let's make a quick check. Who already uses request mocking in test automation? Okay, so there is some experience in the audience. Let's see how it goes with my experience. So let's meet the application that I prepared. During the talk, I will switch between slides, application, and we will view some code. So I will try to do it smooth, so it should be easy to follow. So this is the app under test. Let me make it bigger. Okay, and this is a web application that just shows list of users with these crazy avatars. And this list of users is loaded using the API call from the browser. And if I open the network, make it bigger, and if I reload the page, if I reload the page, I can see this request here. So this is the request performed from browser, and I see the JSON response that is later rendered as a page. So imagine you've got this application and you need to test it. What would be the most common test cases that you would apply to this application? Now we can make it more interactive. So does anybody have suggestions? How can we test such application? Which test cases? 0 users. Noted. Agree. Anything else? or we just check 0 users for this application. Okay, I can propose before 0 users, non-zero users, correct? So the first one is a normal flow. If API returns some users, we want to check that some users rendered on the screen, right? And that's a great suggestion. We should check if API returned empty list. We expect some message like no users found. Okay, anything else? Pagination, agree, good suggestion. Something else? Error flow, exactly. So if API fails, we expect that application handles this case and shows us error message with some details, so to show that something goes wrong. Okay, that's great. I think we can imagine more, but let's stick with 3 test scenarios. So this is normal flow. Let me go here. This is normal flow. This is empty list scenario and error flow. So, and then we will try to evaluate these 3 test cases over the application. Let's start with the most straightforward approach. We don't know about request mocking, just test what we have. So the test plan is we load the application and check that there are users in the list. Now let's view the code of such test. The code will be in JavaScript, but I tried to make it clear so it should be understandable. Okay. Is it visible, readable from the back? Okay. So this is the setup. I will use Firefox and I enable BiDi. And after each test, I add an intentional delay to let you better see what's happening, and just browser quits. And here is the test. So in the first step, it loads my application that's running on localhost. Then it waits for users list to get actually loaded. And after that, I'm checking that there are 6 elements in the list, and the first user has this name. So let me run this test in live, not a recording, to actually check what's going on. Running, 6 users, okay. So test, passing, everything okay. What do you think about this test? Imagine you've got this test from a colleague or maybe from AI agent. So what will be your maybe suggestions or proposals? Or maybe it's okay, we just merge it into the code base and everything is fine. Accepting this test? Setup data. So yeah, imagine our API changed and it returned 5 users for some reason. Or the order of elements changed and the name of the first user is different. We can emulate these. For example, I can change 6 into 5 and run the test again. And we expect it should fail. Okay, let's check. Okay, it fails and it shows that 6 does not equal 5. And any other disadvantages of this test? So we discussed 3 scenarios. And here we are covering only the success flow when there are users in the list, and we check that there are some users. But here we can't actually test the empty list scenario because we can't force API to return empty list. And also we can't test error flow because we are always, in most cases, if our API is stable enough, we will get some data. If our API is not stable, we will get some errors, but this is not what we want to achieve. So looks like we have some problems with our tests. Let's try to fix it. So let's quickly summarize. The main normal load test is flaky because it depends on the API. It highly relies on the API. and empty list scenario and error scenario is not covered. Okay, so let's try to fix it. And here we can talk about BiDi. So the general idea is we want to force browser to return the known data, so the application will be in the desired state, and we can run our assertions over this known state. And BiDi, that is bidirectional communication, so it lets our test to communicate with browser to make this setup. And here is the schema how it works. So actually test tells to the browser, please, when you will be performing this request, ask me what to do. And after that, when browser really making this request, before going to real API, it sends a WebSocket message to the test and asks, okay, I am going to make this request. How should I handle that? And test can decide, please do not do any real request, just respond with the mocked data I provided you. So this is what we actually want to achieve. And having this in mind, let's take a look on the updated test code. So the setup is absolutely the same, but here we have this step. So actually, we are setting up some mocking. And what it says that when you will be making this request to this API endpoint, please provide me two users with the names user1 and user2. And then we are doing the same. We are opening the application. We are waiting for users list to load. And in the assertion stage, we are checking that there are exactly two users in the list, and the name of the user1 is user1. And what I personally like about this test, that the arrange step matches with the assertion step. So for anybody who will read this test, it's more or less obvious. So we set up an array of 2 elements, and we make an assertion that there are 2 elements. We provided user1 as a name for the first item, and here we assert that there is user1. And this is better compared to the first version of the test, where we checked some random name of some random user. And now we can implement REST scenarios that we discussed. So we can implement empty list scenario. And here we are mocking the response with just to return the empty array as a response. Then we do the same, load the application, wait for users list to load. And finally, we are checking that there is a message, no users found. Let's run it. So now when application will appear, there should be a message, no users found. Let's see. Okay, no users found, and our test passed. And also, we can test the error flow now. And here, when we define our mock, we provide a 500 error as an API response. Then we load the application, wait for users list to load, and we assert that there is a error 500 instead of users list. Let's run this test as well to ensure it works. Yeah, error 500, everything passed. So from my opinion, this is a great achievement because we improved scenario coverage, and we also made the test more reliable, not so dependent from the API response. Okay. This is great, I think, because with Selenium BiDi APIs, we can do much more with our testing because we can emulate any scenarios dependent on the network activity, and we have covered all 3 scenarios that we wanted to cover. Okay, and this is for browser-side mocking. Everything is great, but we still have a problem. Our engineering team may come and say, okay, we installed a new version of the front-end framework that renders everything on server. what changes? Now users are rendered into HTML on the server, and there is no browser-side request to the user's endpoint. So we have nothing to mock with the previous approach. And how can we achieve the same result, cover all the scenarios that we discussed to actually write automated tests for our application? Let's quickly have a look. So visually it's the same, but if I open the network request and when I reload the application, there is no request to user's endpoint. So there is nothing to mock. What can we do in this situation? Any suggestions so far? Mock API server, exactly. So I called it a traditional approach and use some mock server. There are different solutions in this field, but the idea is the same. So instead of routing requests to a real API, we somehow instruct the application on the server, not in the browser, to route requests to a mock server that provides JSON responses, and then we perform our testing. And here, there is nothing about BiDi for now, because BiDi can communicate with the browser, but not with the server. But we want to mock here, not here. And it works, but it comes with own challenges. And I personally is not a fan of this approach because it works fine locally, but when you are scaling your tests, you should think about scaling this mock server. There are different strategies. You can route all your parallel tests into a single mock server, but in this case, you need to isolate data between all these parallel runs. Also, there may be connectivity issue between app server and mock server. So there are challenges. And what I want to avoid when during testing infrastructure, I don't want to invest more time into the testing. I want to invest more time into the app development. So I want to share an alternative approach. It's not absolutely new, but it's based on some existing approaches. And this idea came to my mind maybe some 6 months ago, and now in my company we're using it. So the idea is following. Instead, we can put the whole mock data with the JSON, whatever, into HTTP header and pass this header along with the navigation request to the browser. And then on the application server, we intercept these headers, handle them, and if there is a request to real API, in this case, we just return response without making request to a real API. How this header can look, here is the example. So it's just stringified JSON string with all the parameters of our mock that we want to achieve. Now, let's check the code for this server-side mocking. It is very similar to what we had before, but now we have this mock server-side request helper function. And what it says that when you will be navigating to this URL, please attach a custom header containing the information about mock. And the mock itself is that when you will be requesting users from this URL, instead of making real request, provide this response with user 1 and user 2. So then we do absolutely the same things that we was doing with client-side mocking. We are opening the application, waiting for list to load, and checking that there are 2 users in the list, and the first name is user 1. Let's run it. Okay, there were 2 users. And again, we can implement empty list scenario. with the similar technique and error scenario with the similar technique. So let's run error, for example. So we should see error where users list should be. Okay, and I forget to dive into the helper itself. So okay, let's do it now. Because this helper actually does some magic, so we need to inspect what's inside. Without going much into the details, so here I am using the standard API for Selenium BiDi for JavaScript, but there are similar APIs for other languages. And in the first step, our test enables network interception for page URL navigation. Then we construct this custom header that carries all the information about the mock. And then we are waiting for event from the browser. And when there is a navigation request, we attach our custom header and just continue request to let browser make this request with custom header. So this is how it works internally. And when yesterday Diego was talking about high-level API over the Selenium BiDi, I hope that it would be something like this helper. So I do not want to write these in each my project. So I would expect from Selenium BiDi to give me like, I want to mock this request on server, or I want to mock this request in browser. And it would be very useful. Okay, returning to the presentation, and important point here. So we mocked everything from the test level, but on the application, we need somehow to handle this information about mock. And this is the instrumentation that depends on the code language, or framework, and the programming language that we use. Here is the example specifically for Next.js framework. And here they have a special file, instrumentation.js, that automatically can help you instrument any outgoing requests. So you can apply any custom logic before real request is performed. But you can take this idea, and I absolutely sure that any programming language and framework has some techniques to perform instrumentation of internals. But of course, there are limitations. And the first limitation is declarative nature of mocking information. Because we need to transfer this mock information over the network to via the custom HTTP header, the mock should be serializable. So we can't put a custom logic or custom function. We should declaratively define what we should mock and how we should respond. And the second limitation is the header size limit. So it's about 4 or 8 kilobytes, but usually it's fine. So from my perspective, these limitations are fine because your mocks should not provide hundreds of fields for mocking. You should focus on the minimal state required for your test so that it would be clear why you are mocking exactly these fields. So what we've got with server-side mocking, we covered all 3 scenarios that we discussed. I didn't use any mock server, but I managed to mock everything what I wanted. And the general idea that each test carries its own data with all mocks, passes it to the server and gets the result. And this approach highly scalable because each test does not depend on any mock servers. It's just self-contained. And for JavaScript, I created the implementation of this approach. So if you use JavaScript, you can try this open source solution. If you use other languages, you can just take this idea, ask AI agent to build a prototype and to see how it works for your project, and maybe share the results on the next Selenium Conf. So what we've learned today. Request mocking can improve testing experience. Initially, we tried without it, and we noticed that we can't cover all scenarios, and our test was flaky. For client-side mocking, Selenium BiDi already provides us enough API to do everything with the requests originating from browser. And for server-side mocking, it's more complex. It requires the collaboration of browser and the server. But finally, we can follow this approach, and it should allow you to use similar syntax to perform mocking of requests on the server. And the final thing, in general, about request mocking. So when you do request mocking, please keep your mocks in sync with real API responses. Because otherwise, your tests may be green, everything could be fine, but when you release, you got bugs in production because real API response already far from what you have in your mocks. This is the separate topic, maybe for separate discussion, because it's not so obvious how to manage this stuff. But in general, we should at least keep in mind that do not just rely on mocks and forget about real APIs. So that's it from me for today. Thank you for your attention. Here is the master link to slides and demo application and my LinkedIn contact, so you can get in touch. And I'm ready to answer your questions. Oh.
Wait.
Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. I've got concerns, specifically security concerns. I don't think, at least from my experience, any enterprise would allow any custom headers which can inject some JS and then processing it. How do we address security? How do we handle it? Thank you.
So the question is, if we attach custom headers to navigation, it can be cut by some security policies, right?
Custom headers, but specifically, if I talk about mocking, if I talk about traffic management or some more complex logic, so for example, instead of returning one thing, we're returning another, it's a possible security breach. So, and well, it's obviously not allowed in production, but even locally, I don't think, at least my customers would accept having even a possibility of such an injection.
I got it. Okay, yeah, this is good concern. And when I talk about instrumentation, there was a condition that we enable it only in non-production environments. So it's a valid concern. Valid concern, so it's always trade-off. So if we want to check the production, you should decide, if I want to check all the scenarios, I need to have some solution. If I'm okay with just success flow, I can do the approach that we discussed initially. So just check that in case of any response from API, we are not crashing. So this is the trade-off. But it's absolutely valid concern that for production, we should think about these security aspects.